Any thoughts on the earlier class? Because we kind of cut off at the end.
You know what? I tell you what, I really enjoy just the fellowship with our brothers and sisters in these communities. Uh, they give us a different, perspective and perception from a different part of the world. And so that's always refreshing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yes.
can be they can be fiery, can't
Yeah, there's a lot going on over there. It's like it's a whole, you know what I'm saying? It's a huge continent.
they? Hmm.
So, yeah, but I mean, hey, the key thing is we're all trying to understand God's Torah.
That's right.
So that's the key thing. All right. Um, all right, whatever people come in, they come out, whatever. All right. So the thing is that so the idea that we're focusing on, and like I did it. I mentioned it to OT not earlier today, but I did an interview earlier today. It was just kind of like, my perspective as a person, this, the whole thing. And, we got in this conversation about the soul and, like, really kind of like looking at the world in that way and saying, like, hey, you know what? When we look at what's missing in the world, it's a knowledge of the soul. And when we acknowledge the soul, like, we automatically, by definition of seeking, okay, what the needs of the soul are, we automatically have to bring the name of God into it, right? So we elevate, we sanctify the name of God just from this conversation, right? And when you elevate the name of God and you say, okay, well, God is the source of this and this is how it works. Okay, so then you have to connect it to the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, right? And then so from there, you automatically connect it to Israel. So now, through this connection of the soul in the whole dynamics, now you've elevated the name of Israel. And once you elevate the name of Israel, but okay, what's going on? Who is Israel? What's the whole thing? And then by Israel, then you have to, you elevate Jerusalem, right? And by elevating Jerusalem, like, wait, it's okay to love Jerusalem. Okay, boom. Now you have to elevate the holy temple. So so that's what we're like kind of like dealing with. Like, how do we get the world to that consciousness? Right? And so when we're learning from the sages and we're doing all this whole concept, the whole concept of this yeshiva, right, and the learning and all the things that we're doing is to create solutions for these issues. So the number one issue is that we're saying we have identified the problem. We're saying as an organization that the world is not receiving the light that it needs, and the vessels are empty. And because of that, a lot of violence, a lot of craziness, a lot of anti-Semitism, all these things are happening, senseless murders, people dying, curable diseases, the whole thing. So that's what we're up against, right? So how do we get to what do we need to do to get to the point of shifting that we could use the material or the physical world as a tool to aid us in the focus and the efforts of bringing light to our soul and thus fueling our ability to live out our corrections, which is the purpose of creation. So that's where our focus is, right? That's what we're trying to understand. So our philosophy is, or our outlook. I don't know if philosophy is the right word. A lot of people aren't with philosophy and Torah, but our approach is that we're saying, like, hey, well, we want to learn the sages who've written about these issues and have seen the world in this way and have trained themselves, to see the world in this way, and they've written about it, right? Because the more we can understand it, the more clarity we can have about it now, and then the more clarity we have about it now, the more we can contemplate solutions on how to bring the world to this point. Because in the interview I did today, I talked about Yeshiva Sanhedrin. But Yeshiva Sanhedrin, I said to him, is a yeshiva for influencers, right? And people who are influencers, people who want to be influencers, or yeah, are aspiring to be influencers, whatever, right? all those people, we want to train them and give them I don't know, I don't like the word train. That sounds like very domestic, but we want to be able to give tools to turn this like new generation of influencers into people that see the ability to use their platforms for the sake of good, right? And creating kind of like this Hesed economy where it's like, okay, where influence comes in and they learn and we build perspective and from building perspective, um, they're able to go out and expand it for not just fame for the sake of fame, fame for the sake of fame, but rather fame or influence for the sake of the betterment of the collective, right? And so that's kind of like that's our outlook, like on a very. You gonna say something? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, sir. Can you hear me okay? Am I clear?
Yeah, yeah, you good.
Okay. Over Shabbat, we were really talking about, just having the perception to look at the soul, right? And so what you're talking about is very poignant because what we did was we took an analogy, we took a situation. In America, I know you're quite familiar with George Floyd, right? You familiar with George Floyd, that
Yeah,
situation?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we were looking at the situation when everything happened with George Floyd, right? What you saw was, and it was all over. So you saw a European police officer, okay, and he, you watch him with his knee on George Floyd on a black man's knee, right? And he died. And what happened was the world erupted. Okay, I mean, just all of these different protests and all these different things going on all across the world. I mean, even China they had protests in China, right? But then about a week or so ago, there was four, I believe, it was four black police officers, okay, that was filmed brutally murdering a young black male, and it was all over it was all over the news in the United States. I don't know if it made broke, but in their situation, if you put it, I mean, it's murder, is murder, and brutality, is brutality. But this was very graphic. It was very, very. I mean, they beat this man to death, basically. And the young man is seen screaming for his mother, which lived like a block away. He was trying to run to her house. Okay. Now, these four black police officers were released. That they were basically released. They were not. They're not in trouble. All right. And it's silent. It's silent. And so what we were talking about was when do we become a people to where when we look at certain situations, we have been trained by a system to see uh, see a situation and say, oh, racism, prejudice, that's the problem. In the whole world erupts. But when you see it from a different perspective, the same uniform, same situation, but now it's more silent. There's hardly any protest. There's no outcry. Right? Nothing is noticed, and it's because of the perception. It's because we have learned not to look at the soul. Because when we look at George Floyd's situation, we should have saw, hey, this is two souls. One soul is murdering and killing another soul. And then we look at these four officers. This is four souls killing another soul. And it's like, it's murder. And that's how we should look at it. And so, but whenever there's this situation where you put these constructs on, you put racism or prejudice on it, not everyone that has anyone that may feel oppressed is going to jump up and say, hey, oh yeah, 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 we're going to fight. But instead of looking at the core value of it, it's saying, man, this is murder. Murder is murder. So, and this happens every day. And there should be a world of peace every day when we see another soul, we kill another soul, regardless of if it's a uniform, it can be a tow truck driver, it doesn't matter. But I love what you're doing because it is teaching the world to see a soul and to see as a soul. Whereas, when you see other people, instead of seeing the outward appearance of them, you see, man, this is a creation of God right here. And then you look at it and you're able to see through those same lenses. So I appreciate it. So that. Yeah, I'm on that. I think you made me.
Yeah. So, no, I was just like just thinking about what you were saying and just kind of like just saying, but that's the revolution, right? The revolution is that challenging of society and the norms of society that does not acknowledge that, right? Which creates a reality where we focus, like you're saying, on the different skin tone versus the energy of hatred, the energy of insensitivity, the energy of cruelty, the energy of brutality, which exists all over the world, right? And is happening in societies all over the world of all different types of skin tones and everything, right? And so that's our focus is being able to tackle the challenges in the world from that perspective. Saying like, hey, you know what? You know, if we looked at this problem that's happening and this challenge that's happening, and we said, hey, you know what? Um, well, what is how could this potentially affect my soul for good or bad? This may be whether it's an environment, whether it's a philosophy, whether it's a ritual, whatever it is, but I need to analyze that. And what is this, how does this connect for my soul? And it's like in Torah or say, as Judaism as we know it, that's the whole system, is that. So anyways, so with that being said, I want to continue on with the Tanya. Okay, so this is actually chapter 3. We're just, we're moving forward, and we're dealing with this idea of the soul, right, and this dynamic of the soul, and that's what I'm saying. So when we have the mindset of what we're learning, what we're reading, and having an attention for, right? It's not just as you guys know, I'm talking more people listen to it. It's like it's not an intellectual thing. This is like figuring out the codes of the universe so we can make major impacts. It says Vehine Kola Vekina Umad Rage Umarega Mi Shalosh Elu Nefesh Ruach Nashama. Okay. So he says, now each distinctive trait of the three, Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, consists of 10 faculties, okay, corresponding to the supernatural 10, 10 sphero, right? Keter Hokmabina has to give a word to very next to Hokia Sword. No. So he says, from here, he says, from which we have descended, in which are divided into two, namely three mothers. All right, that's the whole thing. Are divided into three mothers and seven multiples, namely Chokmah, Bina, and Dot. Chokmah, Bina, Dot. And the 7 days of creation. That's the Gevurah. Okay. All right, so he's coming out with the heavy guns. All right, so in essence, he's basically saying, we have these 5 levels to the soul: Kaya, Yakida, Nefesh, Ruach, sorry, Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh, right? And so he's focusing on Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh, right? So he's not dealing with the upper two. for whatever reason, right? He probably said it before. But the point is saying he's not dealing with that right now. But what he is dealing with is those are three. And what we're saying is that within those levels, those three aspects of the soul, there's 10 dimensions to it, right? And we know what the measuring stick for that is. It's the Keter Hokmah. So he's saying, he says, which are they have descended. He says they are subdivided into two, namely three mothers, right? And the seven multiples. So he's saying the three mothers would be in a frame of, say, Chokmah Bina Dot, right? And he's just divided into three mothers. So he's saying those three mothers, and I guess he's calling them mothers because then the fathers would be the actual light itself. You get it? You're talking about the vessel. So he's saying, so he says, in the seven multiples, right? Has a Gevur Tiferet. So he's talking about those. He says, namely, Chokmah Bina Dot. That's what we just said, right? And the 7 days has a Gevur Tiferet, and that's called, whatever. And he says and so on. He says Vikak be nefesh ha'adam. Sheni kalachet shiva tayit. All right. So he says, okay. He says similarly it is. He says similarly it is with the human soul, which is divided into two intellects and midot. Okay, so the two parts, intellect and midot. So basically, thinking process and behavior. Okay, so it says Shay. He says Hashekel Kolel. He says Chokmah Bina Vedat. He says the intellectual includes the Chokmah Bina and Dat. While the midots are the love of Hashem, the fear of Hashem, the glorification of Him, and so on. So he says, Ve Bina Vedat. He says, but you have the Chabad, here's the Chabad system, right? Chokmah, Bina, and Dat, Chabad, he says, are called mothers. He says, the source of the Midot in the ladder. He says, so basically he's saying here that the thinking process affects everything, all of our actions, right? And he's explaining it through the sphere. And so he says the mother, and he says in the latter are the offspring of the former. So he's saying so the mido that express how we express ourselves in the world are created by through the intellect. He says Zu'uve ur, he says Hanaim kihine mahashekel ha bi nefesh. He said the explanation of the matter. He says the explanation of the matter is as follows: the intellect. Excuse me. It said the intellect of the rational soul, which is the faculty that conceives anything, is given in the application of chokmah, the potential. So this is a thing. How do we understand this idea of the intellect creating reality? And then not only that, how do we understand this idea of being able to put it into these like categories, like Chokmah, Bina, Dot, this type of thing, right? Okay, so this is something that I kind of designed years ago, and whatever it was, because I wanted to explain this idea to the kids, right? That was the idea. So the thing is like this. So I divided it into four parts. It's a whole thing. I'm gonna use it at some point. So the first part is thought, thinking, concept, and idea. Like those four parts. So thought, thinking, concept, and idea. All right. So what does that mean? So that means that when we look at how, what is the process of how thoughts emerge, right? Like when a person decides, oh, I want to go to, I want to go and get something to eat, or I want to tell this person this. What is the process that they go through to get to that conclusion or that conception of this particular action? What's the process? Right. And so what I'm saying is that I divided it into, four brackets, which is thought, thinking, concept, and idea. And it's basically a way to kind of like really contemplate our thinking process. So for example, a person has a thought. What is a thought? What is the root of a thought? The root of a thought is a desire. And so there's a desire, and then so for whatever reason, whatever information a person's gathered in their life, when they have this desire, there's something that's involved in this desire, and this dynamic that's involved in the desire is called is it's called it's called thought. So, like for example, like a person, a person, kind of a controversial idea, but a person could, per se, have a desire, like they feel alone, right? They feel like they're by themselves, they feel alone, the whole thing. So how do they deal with it? So they'll go out and maybe get something to eat, right? So they'll go out and they'll eat, and the frame of them eating would be because they feel alone. So when they eat food, it's not that they're hungry per se. It's the fact that by eating this food, the satiation of the food makes them feel like, you know, maybe Hashem's presence was subconsciously, whatever. But the point is just saying, like, they don't feel as alone, right? And so whenever they feel this kind of like sense of loneliness, they go and they eat food, right? This is how they respond to it. Now the thing is, without such a thought reflection like reflectory, thinking process, you wouldn't, maybe a person would just overlook it and say, that this person, one second, they will say that, this person, you know, they'll say this person has a big appetite, right? This person has a big appetite, right? So what we're doing right now is that what we're saying is what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand this concept of the intellectual aspect of the soul and the physical aspect of the soul, right? And so what we're talking about in this frame is that we're saying that, hey, you know what? And this is a system that I designed, right? And the system is broken into four parts, as we'll say it again briefly. It is thought, thinking, concept, and idea, right? And so this process, right? This process of understanding like the maturation or the progression of an idea, right? Because we do things all the time. All the time. We wake up, we do this, we do that, we do this, we do that. Do we think about what is the process of us conceiving, you know, our thoughts, right? Like what is the process of our actions, right? Like the action that I do, how did I come to this conclusion mentally for that to trickle down into my physical body into this action? What was the process? So we're saying thought, thinking, concept, and idea. So I'm using this example to start with the idea. So say a person, has a thing where they like to eat, when they feel lonely, right? Snacks, meals, whatever. They like to eat when they feel lonely, or they have this sense of loneliness, right? Because the question is, if you're saying thought, thinking, concept, and idea, it's this matrix to understand thought, then we got to ask ourselves, well, what's the root of a thought, right? What is a thought, right? So we're on the same page. A thought is an expression of a desire with somewhat of a solution attached to it, right? It's not 100%, but it's a thought process. So a person feels lonely, their thought, their thought process, because of the way they've been trained for various reasons, whatever. They've been trained, they had a certain thought process and they were trained, and then they said, hey, you know what? Um, um, this thought matches up to this desire being filled, right? So, for example, a person could say, you know what, I feel lonely, and I'm gonna go and order pizza. They're not ordering the pizza because they're hungry. They're ordering the pizza because they, they they want to cope, right? With this feeling that they have. They want to subdue it. So from that perspective, then it's like, okay, so that's why they're doing it. So the root desire is not hunger. The root desire is, you know, kind of like, pacifying this feeling, right? Through some physical means. So that's the thing, right? So when we understand the thought process, we say, okay, well, where did that thought come from? That thought of eating, right? That thought of eating came from this core desire that had to do with dealing with an emotional lack. So the way to deal with that emotional lack is the thought came to eating. And then from eating, it says, okay, well, I'm hungry, right? I want to get some, or I want to get something to eat. So then they go and get something to eat, right? So now they have to think about, well, what do I want to eat? This, that, this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and then they say, you know what? I'm in the mood for this, right? So that's when it turns into a concept, right? When it says, okay, well, I'm in the mood for Chinese. That's a concept. And then when you decide what Chinese place you're going to go to and how much you're going to buy and what exactly you're going to get, that's the idea. That's the full idea. But it's still, in order for that full idea of where you want to eat at before you get in your car or order it or whatever that process is, went through the process I just outlined: thought, thinking, concept, and idea. And so, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You're kind of muffled a little bit. I don't know if it's you can fix it.
Now?
Yeah, great. Wow.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, yep, yep.
Okay. Okay. What I was going to ask is, okay, you said the thought, is, I thought it was thought, thinking, idea, and then the concept, but is it reversed? The
Yeah,
idea,
it's concept idea.
okay, concept idea. Now, can you explain again the idea? Because I had, like, you said you're hungry, the thought, and then the thinking was, what do I eat, pretty much. But then the concept was the stage of the actual action. What is the idea?
Okay, so let's start just from the beginning part. So the thought is the first stage, right? So the question that I'm starting with thought is, where does thought originate from? Okay. And so I'm saying thought originates with a desire, and that desire is connected to some type of a lack. Okay. And so that lack that exists turns into a thought. And however the information that a person has, the way that they understand this lack turns into a thought. Like, so for example, some people, could come from an environment where, say, physical aggression is a way to resolve conflict. Other people may deal with lawyers, right? But the point is the same: the lack, whatever the conflict is, existed. And so the thought, based off of the information that they have around them, is how to is in essence how to manifest this, how to reconcile this lack, and that in the reconciliation of the lack is the thought itself, right? So what I'm saying is that a person could desire to get something to eat, to get something to eat, not because they're hungry, but for other reasons, right? And I use the example of a person who is getting something to eat as a form of comfort, right? So external, you say like, hey, this person has a big appetite. But in another way, if you in a thinking process, right? That thinking process, which is an energy development process in essence, that we're saying that the thinking process, the thought process is connected to whatever information. And so in this case, this person who's feeling this lack, and I'm putting the name on this lack and saying this person feels, say, alone. And so their way of coping with feeling alone is eating or snacking. And so this person has this feeling of alone come to him, and it instantly the thought comes to his mind, and the thought is for sure going to be eating, because that's the way he's in essence been trained, or to understand how to rectify this issue. So he first has a thought that he wants to get something to eat. The second process is the thinking process. So now that we've established a thought, which is I want to get something to eat, which is connected to this other desire of lack, right? Now I could say, okay, well, now that I've acknowledged I want to get something to eat, or this is the way I'm going to reconcile the lack, then I'm gonna move into this process of thinking, which is the process of creating the pathway of manifesting, manifesting, like, because so now you have to think about it. Okay, so now I decided that the way that I reconcile this lack is through eating. So now I'm thinking about what do I want to eat. So now it leaves the aspect of just a thought, and now you're actually thinking and contemplating stages, right? You're contemplating, like, okay, maybe I want to eat this, maybe I want to eat that, maybe I want to eat this, I want to eat that. And then you come to a conclusion of what you want to eat. So now you have a direction from that thought, and from your thinking process, and your thinking process now says, okay, I want to have lamb. Okay, I want to have lamb. And so that thinking process produces concept of lamb. And then now you move on to the next stage, which is concept, which is, okay, so now with this concept, I want to be able to understand, like, what are all the mechanisms that require me to get the lamb, right? Do I need to drive to the store? What type of lamb do I want to get? What store do I want to go to? How much do I want to spend? All these different, components, right? So you have to put in all these different pieces, which is the concept of what you're doing. And then after you come to a conclusion and all those parts, that's when it turns into the idea. And the idea is the GPS that we use to manifest. Is a GPS we use to manifest that thought. That's the idea, is the end of that. And so each of those different stages we could have in our minds, and we train ourselves. And this is something I've worked a lot on, is when I have a thought, or if I'm thinking about something, or if I have a concept of what I want to do, I want to backtrack and say, where is this actually coming from? Because if a person is lonely, for example, right, and they choose eating, and they understand that, well, you know what, even though I may get a short-term pleasure from the eating of the food, I'm ultimately damaging myself long term. Or some people have that same relationship with other, say, substances, or even relationships, or other different, ways of disconnection. Some people work a lot, whatever. So it's so many things, right? And so the point is just saying that idea is being able to say, like, okay, well, I have this thought of something that I want to do. Now I want to ask myself, where is this thought coming from? And even if I skip that part and I'm already thinking something out, right? I can still catch it at that point and says, well, what is this thinking? What am I thinking this out from? I'm thinking out from this thought. Okay, so where does this thought come from? It comes from this desire. What is this desire? What is the desire really about? Because maybe the way that I express that desire in a thought is based off of, learned behavior, right? But that learned behavior is not going to give me the results that I want, right? And so now I have the ability to take this process of taking a thought or taking a desire and really unpacking it and saying, like, okay, so now I have a whole new mechanism to strengthen and to understand my creative process of how thoughts turn into ideas, into manifestation, right? And then now I could take that mechanism of that and say, hey, you know what? I now have control over my thinking process, because if I am having thoughts that are not connected to what my real desire is, right? Because that loneliness may say, okay, well, instead of going to get some snacks, maybe you should read Tehillim. Maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that, maybe, all these different things, right? So So I think that is that's where we're at, right? And that's where the creative power. Any thoughts on that? Any reflections?
No, thank you. That was clear. I was kind of I don't know why I thought that the idea was before the concept or whatnot, but now it's a little bit more clear to me as to the thought process that we have. It comes from a place of lack that we're lacking something. Sorry about the children; they're just
That's
coming
cool.
in. But that but that's it. That's what I was kind of I wasn't clear on that part, the idea and concept.
Yeah. It's cool. It's cool. Yeah, and it's just it's like the four phases of creative thought, right? And it's just it's a very important idea because it really allows us to just really kind of like think things out. You know what I mean? And really say like, where are we coming from? And especially with children, it's like, where is this coming from? Like, are you just reacting? Because being reactive is going from the thought to thinking to concept to idea, without any questioning of anything. Right? We should
Okay,
have.
that's good. That's good. I appreciate that. Just thinking about that from the framework of children and how they do that. So we have to be very guarded in that arena with our thought process. And that's something that I know for me. I'll think something and I'm like, okay, I've never really taken the time to say, why am I thinking that? Or why is that thought there? And so it's a process.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like, I remember, like, I probably told you this before, you guys before this. It's like, my parents got really into this whole blood type diet and whatever. But the thing is, there's certain foods based off of your blood type that can make you more irritable. You know what I mean? Like more anxious, less relaxed, less calm, and there's different reasons why. It's a whole story. I'm not going into it. But the point is just saying, like, you just think about like not just that, but like environments, vibration, energetic, these things can affect us. And then we could just be reacting and not ask ourselves, wait, what's going on with me right now? Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel this way? Like I remember like once, like this guy, like I feel like he was being kind of like rude to me a little bit at shul once. I mean, whatever. It's a guy that I know. It's not like some like guy who's just like being mean, right? But I'm saying it's a guy that I know, and I don't really understand why he's being this way. But it's just a thing, right? And I felt myself like being offended, and I really had to like sit back and ask myself like, well, why are you offended? Like, what is this? Where is this coming from? Like, right? I'm being my own therapist, right? I'm like, where is this coming from? Like, why do you feel offended by this person's action? Oh, because he's not giving me respect and blah blah blah. We said, but why do you need respect from him? Like what's going on with you? Like, why do you need respect? Oh, because I'm feeling insecure. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what they go. Why are you feeling insecure? Ah, because of this and this, which has nothing to do with, right? And so you get to deal with that place of where you're coming from and where you're lacking, and you're able now to talk to Hashem and fill that with light, right? That lack, you get to fill that with light, right? And so that's where we're going to, because the whole aspect of freedom is to educate a population on how to connect to fulfillment without any materialism, right? Just speaking to God and go ahead.
And that's powerful because what it does is it eliminates uh, fault finding, and it eliminates looking outside of yourself to the root of the problem. Where you're getting to the root and saying, you know what, hey, there's no excuses. I can't make up an excuse, and there's no excuse for why I feel the way I feel, except that I have to be in control of my reality. I can control how I feel about certain things, and why am I just having that self evaluation? I think that's good. That's that pause that I believe you were talking about.
The what?
You know what I'm saying? That like before you make a decision or before you say something, this is a couple
Yeah,
classes
yeah.
back.
Restriction. Yeah, the pause. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's positive reality, but we're going even more in depth into that right now, and we're saying like, hey, you know what, you know, you know, we have to, we have to go into this frame of like becoming like new types of people, right? Because so much of the tools that we were given in society were there just for us to do labor, right? And to think in a way of laborers, right? And so now we're saying like, hey, our desire, God has made our desire like so much more that like now we got to really connect to higher fulfillments, and we can labor, right? But perhaps there's a certain level of connection where that I'm able to kind of like manifest, right? I'm able to manifest. I'm able to manifest. I'm able to manifest my desires. Even though I am laboring, but through my efforts and what my connection to God, God brings certain things at the right time, at the right amount to evolve me to higher levels of status. But God's going to do that. He's going to give me the man. He's going to give me the grain each day of the Omer. What is the Omer? The Omer is my whole life, right? But we take this time to really focus on it. But really, the Omer is our life. It's these 50-day cycles, 7-year cycles, 50-year cycles, 49-year cycles, this is our life. So what we're saying is it's like, when we talk about becoming new people, it's just saying like, hey, you know what? I don't have to be a slave to my instincts. I don't have to be a slave to my reactivity. I don't have to be slaves to my fears. I don't have to be slaves to my anxiety. I can actually go and do surgery on myself and say, okay, well, you know what? What's going on with me? Like, how do I check in with myself? How do I connect to that? And then once I understand, what the root of what I'm dealing with, then I could pull out, I could read Tehillim, I could start praying, and now I have a whole nother mechanism, and actually now I sanctify God's name with an element or a challenge that He gave to me for that very reason. Like God created this whole situation for that reason, right? So for me to have to call out to Him, for me to say, Hashem, I need your help with this. This is kind of like above my pay grade, blah blah blah, this type of thing. So that's where we're at with it, right? And so that's what we're working. Go ahead.
Yeah, Chief Rabbi, I was thinking about that because, like, my Ish was just saying about the pause and so forth, and the, having that level of restraint. But going to what you were also saying earlier about, just being in the shul and just, feeling a certain way, and we all have like been in that place where we have this offense. And so what you're saying is that we have to stretch even farther, and it makes me think about a Psalms. I can't remember what Tehillim this is, but it says that those who love the Torah or in the Torah, they're not easily offended. And so it's like, oh wow, like Hashem is like, transforming us in such a way to where it's like, why do I feel this way? And like you're saying, go in and do that surgery, which could be another extent past the pause, right?
Yeah, no, definitely that the surgery part is it's like you see these guys like in these like Olympic, like weightlifting, challenges or whatever, and after they pick up the thing, they lift their hands up, right? So the pause is showing dominance over the self. Like I don't have to, I'm not controlled by my instincts, and I'm here, right? Now the level past that is what we're talking about surgery. Now surgery means that I want to uproot the issue itself, and so I'm going to use this thinking process, right? Because a lot of what I'm saying to you, I developed when I was teaching sixth grade, teaching sixth graders. That's how intense it was. I was like really dealing with like these kids, and it's like, and they were changing every week, because they're growing so fast at that time. And so like I had to get scientific with it. I said, you know what, this kid behavior, this thinking process, I'm gonna go, so because I'm coming from a marketing background, right? So like I'm like, you know what? Like I'm gonna go into the mind of my consumer, which is the student in the classroom, and we're gonna figure this thing out. So I got all these thinking maps, and I started working with this. And I said, we have to think this out stage by stage. Why do you not like school? Right? And I would take them through different stages, and they'd be like, I probably told you this one before. I told this one kid, I'll never forget it. I said, why do you not like school? He says, I said, where did you first get the idea? I said, do you like school? Yes or no? He said, no. I said, so school is whack. He said, yeah, okay. Middle of the thinking max, school is whack. Okay, fine. The next circle, next to that, okay, why do you think school? When did you first hear or learn about the idea of school being whack? He says, my brother told me. Okay, my brother told me it was whack. Okay, next circle. Okay, why did your brother think school was whack? My brother thought school was whack because he got in trouble a lot. Okay, so he got in trouble a lot. Okay, so the fifth column. So now we've established that your brother thinks school is whack because he had an experience, and now because he told you that, you believe school is whack. Yeah. So do you think that's going to help you in life? I understand your brother had that experience, and maybe he was right, maybe he had bad teachers, but what does that have to do with you? Like, why would you, So I really had these conversations with the kids because they were just so like, and it led to so many other forms of creativity. But in terms of like, like a lot of the dance movement stuff and movies and TV stuff that I did from that, and so the thing is just, but the point is just saying that it was on that level, but it's all from, the thinking of our sages, right? And that thinking process of, of going through one's process of their thinking process and spending time with their thinking process, right? And and that dynamic of spending time with one thinking process, being a caveat to have clarity, right? And that caveat to have clarity, is how we make sure we make good decisions in life, right? Like how many times in life we can look back on decisions and say, man, if I just sat back and did this thinking process thing that we're talking about, man, I would have probably made a whole nother decision in life, right? So it's just saying that, but that training ourselves in that way and being able to understand ourselves the same way we could look at the sages, the same way we could look at the prophets, the same way we could look at different kings, different people, and study their thinking process and how they came to certain conclusions. That's only there to strengthen our ability to do it for ourselves and other people, right? So we have to, especially in this time of going into this last phase of the Omer where so much light is being revealed, we could use the strength, right? Especially in the month of Sivan, right? Because the month of Sivan, we'll talk more about it tomorrow, but the month of Sivan it's all about learning new things. There's a certain power in the Bria, right? In the world of creation that comes into the world of Asiya, right? The world that we're in. And there's a certain light that comes in on this month that makes it easier to learn things that we couldn't do normally. It's a crazy thing. Obviously, this is the month the Torah is being revealed. So this is a good time for that. So now I'm introducing this idea of, really segmentizing our thinking process and being able to do that surgery on where we're coming from, because everything that we're lacking, Hashem wants us to lack that. Because Hashem wants us to come and find him, to come and seek and find him. Initially, everyone says, who could find me, right? So it's a person who could find them. I would answer is the person who's looking within themselves, right? And so that's where we're at. So those lack is our friend. Now, when society has told us to deal with our lacks in a ways that perpetuate consumerism, right? And that's the challenge, right? So we understand lack and consumerism like it's synonymous, right? And so that's where the problem is. And so now we need to take that away and say, well, lack is, I don't have to run to the pharmacy. I don't have to run to go to retail shopping. I don't have to run and buy the newest thing. I don't have to run and escape with this or whatever. I can take control and say, you know what, this feeling that I have, this thought that I have, or what I want to do right now, this impulse, where's it coming from? Where's that coming from? I'm not worried about what's going on the outside and this, all that. No, where is this thought coming from? Right? and the thought that I have that's connected to why I have this thought, will this thought actually fulfill this desire? Because some guys, they'll be like, hey man, I need to go out, man, I need to go and party, I need to be out there where the women at. But what are they feeling? They're feeling lonely, they're feeling inadequate, right? They feel disconnected, right? So the thought means, oh well, women, right? So that's what we're saying. So like that misplace of thinking is kind of like what we're developing. Any last closing thoughts on this?
No, Toda, Rabbi, that
Mm.
I just appreciate just the clarity and just bringing things, just circling back and saying, connected to how we should be processing our thoughts through this formula that you gave us. And so it's really good to just look back and go back over those things, because sometimes you just kind of get going and you forget, oh wow, I should be every day continuing to allow that formula to manifest in my day to day routine in life and so forth as I go, because I know that I have a desire to receive in order to share, to share. And so I just appreciate that. And Toda.
Yeah, and then I'll read one last thing. This is something that I just wrote this morning, and it may give strength, but it was also it's a meditation I wrote this morning for the morning, right? So I wrote it on my social media, but I read it here. So it's like this. So it says, every morning when a person wakes up, before getting out of bed, before checking their cell phone, they should lay in bed and contemplate how much the creator of the universe loves them, right? How the creator loves, how the creator's love infuse all the worlds above and below, how much of a gift it is to be alive today, to further expand one's nature from selfishness to sharing, day and life, right? The concept of day and life are two God created mechanisms allowing this human soul to transform his nature from negativity, ego consciousness, to positivity, which is sharing love unconditionally. So anyway, so the opening part of this is this idea of saying that, like, when we're laying in the bed and we're waking up in the morning, is to just to be able to visualize and connect on the amount of love that God has for us. That God, the whole thing with Modiani, right? The amount of love that God has for us, the the amount of love God has for us, the amount of that love exists in all the universes and all things. The fact that He gave us, our soul today is that, right? And he says while laying in bed, he says I'm talking about myself. He says while laying in bed, take a breath and say softly to yourself, every experience for the next 24 hours is an expression of God's love for me. Even if it's painful or overwhelmingly pleasurable, everything comes from the Creator. So it's being able to like really like have this thought and say, hey, you know what, today, I have kids, I have business, I have maintenance, infrastructure, this, all these different things going on. There's going to be challenges, hopefully they're very light, right? But these are things you're just thinking. You don't even have, but this dynamic of being able to speak to yourself and to speak to your neshama, right? And to be able to say, like, hey, you know what, there's going to be challenges today. But everything that I experience is from the Creator. Everything. Everything's from the Creator. And he says, and meditate on the holiness of the soul inside of you. He says, speak to your soul while you're laying in bed and let your soul know that you're aware that it's there. Now, it's an interesting point because it's like it is the soul speaking, right? But in this context, I'm saying it, speak to your soul, right? But it's really the soul that's speaking. It's the intellect. We were talking about the intellect just a second ago, right? The thinking process, right? Because right now I'm not saying, per se to say, but, you could say, while laying in bed, you could say that you're aware, right? So he says also visualizing the best of you to the best of your abilities, the holy sparks existing in all human beings, rocks, plants, animals, all unified by one central source, Hashem. So it's just this idea of like laying in bed and being able to like just visualize all the things that are alive, and you're hearing the birds chirping. I didn't say that, but I didn't want to limit it. You hear the birds chirping, you hear the wind blowing, you hear the horns in the street and the cars and everyone's driving. But you realize that all of these things are sparks of the creator, are motivating them. God created today in order for you to perfect your soul into a higher, he says, and to achieve a higher level of consciousness. So this is what today was for. And most important while laying in bed is to strengthen oneself to reject any idea or notion internally or externally causing you to believe you're not good enough or what's happening to you is not good. Everything is good all the time. Our ego wants to convince us otherwise. He says, utilizing this meditation before going out of the bed or checking your cell phone will allow a person to prepare their vessel to receive all the goodness and blessings God prepared for them today, right? So that's just like a nice like meditation on basically Modiani in essence, right? But instead of saying that, just saying like, because I want to emphasize that point, right? Because some people just say, "Hey, I woke up and I said Modiani." Okay, but what did it mean to you? Did it change you, like, or is it just something you recited because you're doing your good Jew thing? Okay, I'm such a good Jew. I said Modiani. Okay, you said it, but did it change you? Did you think about the universes? Did you think about the greatness? Did you think about the fact your soul's there? Did you think about how much Hashem loves you? Do you fill yourself with love, God, before you even get out of the bed? Right? You automatically are infused with love. You're automatically infused with purpose. That you're going to have these challenges. You're going to have this thing. Before you even get out of the bed, people spend their whole week trying to find purpose, right? And you get out of the bed with it every single day because of this consciousness of the sages, right? So anyways, so that's that point of that. But yeah, so that's what we're working towards like massive behavior modification, perception modification, put it in scientific terms, and to really, really to kind of like really think these things out, right? And to really just think about like, what's stopping us from achieving a level of greatness that we didn't even know existed for ourselves, right? So if that does exist, what do I have to do to open that part of myself up? And that's what I'm saying this modifications from. All right, so we'll continue tomorrow, earlier, obviously. And it was great having you guys in the class with the crew in India. So it's India and Indonesia were in there with us today. And so we had that, in America. So the next stage is, I really want to get something with India, Nigeria, America, and Israel, and those types of things. So that's the direction that we're going in, but it's going in a positive way. God is making everything happen. God's building the relationships. God is strengthening the relationships. And so, we're in business. Now we just need to continue to grow and